Okay, so let's talk about one of the most famous dates in all of English history, 1066. You've probably heard it a bunch of times, right? But why is it so important? Well, it was a year of absolute chaos where a throne was empty and a bunch of powerful people were ready to fight to the death for it. And it all came down to one single epic battle that would change the course of England forever. So, what exactly went down?
Sounds a bit crazy, doesn't it? Three different kings, all in one year. But believe it or not, that's exactly what happened in England in 1066. This incredible power struggle was the spark that lit the fuse for a massive, bloody conflict that would decide the country's entire future.
All right, so here's where our story really kicks off. It all starts with a crisis. The English crown, the ultimate prize, was suddenly up for grabs. And you can bet there were some very powerful, very ambitious men just waiting for their chance to take it.
And just look at how fast everything happened. It's wild. In January, the old king dies. Almost immediately, a new one is crowned. But by September, the whole kingdom is under attack from two different directions at the same time. We're talking total turmoil here. So here's the root of the whole problem. King Edward the Confessor died, and he didn't have any kids. No son, no daughter to take over. This created what we call a power vacuum. And back in the 11th century, a kingdom without a clear leader was basically a giant open invitation for a fight. And here are our three main contenders, each one dead set that the crown belonged to them. First up, you've got Harold Godwinson. He was the most powerful guy in England, and the other English nobles chose him. Then, across the sea in France, was William, the Duke of Normandy. He swore that the old king had promised the throne to him. And finally, sailing in from the north was Harald Hardrada, the seriously tough Viking king of Norway, who had his own ancient family claim to the throne. Three men, one crown. You know this isn't going to end peacefully. So, King Harold gets the crown, but he barely has time to even sit on the throne. Before he can really start worrying about William over in Normandy, a massive threat pops up from the north. Yep, just as Harold's trying to get his kingdom in order, the Viking king, Harald Hardrada, sails his fleet across the sea and lands a huge army in the north of England. This was the first punch in what was about to become a devastating 1-2 combo against the new English king.
Now, just think about the challenge Harold was facing. To even get to the Vikings, he had to march his army almost 300 kilometers north. That is an insane distance to cover on foot, especially when you know there's a huge, brutal battle waiting for you at the end of it. And you know what? He did it. In an incredible move, King Harold's army took the Vikings completely by surprise and won a massive victory at a place called Stamford Bridge. Harold Hardrada was killed, the Viking invasion was crushed, and for just a little while, it really looked like Harold had saved England.
But, and this is a huge but, Harold and his exhausted army had zero time to celebrate. Just a few days after their amazing victory in the north, some absolutely disastrous news arrived from the south. The second invasion had begun. So while Harold was completely preoccupied fighting off the Vikings, William of Normandy saw his chance and he took it. His huge fleet crossed the English Channel, and his army of knights and soldiers landed on the south coast without anyone there to stop them. Harold was literally on the wrong side of the country.
Harold had no choice. He had to turn his exhausted, battle-worn army around and force-march them all the way back down the country, another 400 kilometers. And this time, they'd be facing a fresh, rested Norman army. It was an absolutely desperate race against time.
And that incredible march south is what set the stage for the final showdown. On October 14th, 1066, the Saxon and Norman armies finally came face to face near a small town called Hastings for the battle that would decide everything.
Now, Harold chose his battlefield really carefully. He put his Saxon army on top of a hill and had them form a shield wall. This was a brilliant defensive move. I mean, just picture it, a human wall of wood and steel. How is an army of knights on horseback supposed to break through that while charging uphill? William threw literally everything he had at the Saxon line. First, he sent his archers to fire thousands of arrows, but they mostly just bounced off the shields. Then his foot soldiers charged up the hill, but the Saxons just pushed them back. Finally, he sent in his best troops, his knights on horseback, but even they couldn't break the shield wall on that steep hill. For most of the day, it was a total stalemate. The Saxon defense was just too good. That shield wall would not break, and it was starting to look like William's whole invasion might actually fail. He was running out of ideas.
And then, William pulled off a really clever and pretty sneaky trick. He ordered some of his knights to pretend to run away. Now, some of the less experienced Saxon soldiers saw this, thought they were winning, and they broke out of the shield wall to chase them down the hill. And that was the big mistake William had been waiting for all day. His knights suddenly turned around, surrounded the Saxons who were now out in the open, and completely wiped them out.
That fake retreat was the beginning of the end. It started to create gaps and weak spots in that once unbreakable Saxon line, and it set the stage for the battle's devastating finale. Late in the afternoon, William ordered his archers to do something different. He told them to fire their arrows high up into the air, so they'd come raining down on top of the men behind the shield wall. And sometime during all this chaos, King Harold was killed. The most famous story, the one we see in the Bayeux Tapestry, says he was hit in the eye by a random arrow.
You have to understand, seeing your king die right there on the battlefield is just a catastrophic blow to an army's morale. With Harold gone, the Saxon army lost its leader and its will to keep fighting. The shield wall, which had held strong for so many hours, finally broke apart, and the Normans charged up the hill to claim their victory. So, after the battle, William marched his army to London, and on Christmas Day, of all days, he was crowned King William I of England. But this wasn't just a change of king, oh no. This was the start of something called the Norman Conquest, an event that would completely change England. We're talking a new ruling class, new stone castles all over the country, and even huge changes to the English language itself. Okay, so let's do a super quick recap of the most important facts. The battle was fought on October 14th, 1066. It was between Harold's Saxons and William's Normans. The Saxons had that awesome shield wall on the hill. The Normans' fake retreat was the real game changer. And in the end, King Harold was killed, which allowed William to become the new king.
And that pretty much brings us to the end. It's amazing to think that it all came down to one day, one battle, and maybe, just maybe, one single arrow. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? If Harold had survived, if that shield wall had held on just a little bit longer, how different would the world we live in today actually be?